Hello. This lesson is going to introduce Python commands that control how a computer actually executes a program. Basically, when your Python interpreter is reading your Python code, it processes each statement and it does something. These commands will actually tell it to change the order in which things are done. So for instance, you may want to do a specific task if a condition is true, and do a different task if a different condition is true. You also may want to continually execute the same operations over until a certain condition is met. So specifically, what you're going to learn in this lesson is how to write effective if statements. This will allow you to perform conditional code evaluation. You'll also learn how to write for statements that allow you to iteratively process data, and to write while statements that allow you to perform predefined operations repeatedly until a stopping condition is reached. So in the notebook for this lesson, which we've called Python Flow Control because we're controlling the flow through a program or a script, we're going to look at these statements in more detail. First is the if statement. The if statement is very simple. We write if, and then we have a test which evaluates to either true or false. So in this case, if x is greater than 10, we will do this statement right here. We end the if statement with the colon. We then indent the next statement because this is what's called a code block. We saw this with functions. Now, we can have compound if statements where we say if x is greater than 10, do this, otherwise, or else, if x is greater than 5, do this, else do this. So you can see that if x is 10, we have a big or large number. If x is less than 10 but greater than 5, we have a medium number. Otherwise, x is less than 5. That means x is small. That's all these if statements are doing. And you can see how by putting them together with perhaps more complex tests, we can have a very powerful conditional statement. And you can see that we can also nest these. So we can have if x is greater than 10, and then by indenting 4 spaces, if y is greater than 10, indenting 4 spaces, we have x and y are large. Else, x is large but y is not. And you can see how the flow goes through these. Now, important to note, if x is greater than 10, we're going to execute this code block here because it's indented 4 spaces and none of the rest. If x is not greater than 10, we're going to come down to this one and test is x greater than 5. If so, we will print this statement or do this test, etc. down to this else. It takes a little bit of time, but if you think about it, you'll be able to quickly understand and read these if, elif, else statements. So try that out and see how you can do. Here's that code that I just showed you, but it's actually in a code cell. You should change the values here of x and y and make sure that you understand how these if, else if, and else statements are actually working. Next, we go into iterations and loop statements. One of the powerful things about the compound data structures that you learned earlier, the list, the tuple, the string, and the dictionary, is that we can iterate through them quickly. So, for example, here's a list of data, and the for statement takes the item out of data. So in this case, it'll take 1, it'll do something, and then it'll print. And then it goes up and takes the second item, 2, etc., and then 3, etc., and then 4, etc., all the way until it gets to the end. And when it reaches the end of the data, it exits the loop. The same thing works for tuples, and also for strings, and for dictionaries, although there's a little bit of a difference because here we have a key and a value. So when we access the items out of our dictionary, we'll get the key and the value. Now, sometimes you just want to do the same thing over and over again. In that case, you use the range. What this does is range creates a list of numbers, in this case 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because Python is 0 indexed, we start at 0 and we end before the 10, and then we iterate through them. So you should test these things out in the different code cells and make sure you understand how they all work. The other loop condition is called while, which, while this condition is true, does the indented statements or the code block. This will become an infinite loop if you never change the thing that's actually tested here. So you need to make sure you keep that in mind. And that's demonstrated in this particular code cell here, where we change value. It starts at 1, and we keep iterating through until we reach 1,000,000. That's what 1e6 is. It's a shorthand for 1,000,000. These also can take other optional things here. The for and while can take else. We can also break out of them, and we can also use continue, and the notebook talks about how you use those. And lastly, the pass. It does nothing, but sometimes you need to have a statement in there to make sure it's clear that it is the body of the loop. So this should show you how to use these things. The last part of this talks about list comprehensions or dictionary comprehensions. These are a powerful way to quickly build up a list, and it uses an implicit loop inside. This is optional, so you don't have to do it, but it's something that's very powerful, and you will see in notebooks later on in this course. And so it does behoove you, if you can, to try to go through this and understand this. With that, I will stop. If you have any questions, let us know in the class forums. Good luck.